Alrighty then, let's get this show on the road. Bum 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 bum. Oh, hello there. It's Professor Victor Singingeagle again, here at Sisseton, Wahpeton College. And I just put on my microphone. Hope I don't mess this up. And you can see my eyes are all red. Looks like I've been toking. But no, I don't touch the stuff because, well, I'm a CDL driver as well. But actually, it's because I have a bad habit of putting on, what is that stuff called? Sunblock. And as the day goes on, and it starts to smear and get into your eyes. And so now my eyes are red as a raccoon or red as a test rabbit. Oh man, burns. So I have to ease up on that stuff. Not that it's doing any good. Already wrinkly and dark as could be, but we don't need to go there because we have stuff to talk about. All right, here we go. We didn't really talk about this too much, but this is the Canadian status card, is what it's called. I might have mentioned it before. But yeah, the old status card looks like that, and the new one looks more like that, more digitized and harder to forge. And as opposed to us American Indians down here, we can use our tribal ID cards, whereas this is issued in Canada by the federal government. They have a really weird way up there classifying Indians, unlike the way we do it down here. Down here, nowadays, we can pretty much say it's up to the tribe who's going to be in the tribe. And the U.S. used to have something called a CDIB, Certificate of Degree of Indian Blood, and then I call them Indian pedigrees. That's pretty much in the old days. They used to put it on your birth certificate. Race. I think they have omitted that line on birth certificates in modern times, but they used to have that on there. And some states, now get this is how weird America is with race. Canada's weird too, but America's really weird. You were either black, white, or mulatto. And of course, that created a lot of problems. And primarily, this is in the southern states. You have some Indians, and everybody thought the Indians are all extinct, you see. So they classify you as black, white, or mulatto. And don't get me started on Chinese people or some other group. But no, that's what they really did. They used to classify human beings as either black, white, or mulatto. You take your pick. And so, for my own sake, for example, a lot of my ancestors, their birth certificates say mulatto, which is really weird, but we don't need to get into that. I'm telling you about Canada for a second. Canada, you're either non-Indian or non-native, or you're native, or you're something called Métis, which is spelled M-E-T-I-S. It's a French word that means mixed. And it was a real sexist, and it still exists kind of, sort of. It's really hard to explain, but it was really sexist. Let's say you're a full-blooded Indian girl, and you marry a non-native man, you lose your status, and your children are Métis. However, if you are an Indian guy, and you marry a white girl or Mexican or Chinese girl, but you are an Indian guy with a status card, your kids are still native. Imagine that. Never mind. But that's something for another discussion. To our discussion of more Indian than thou. I know I keep mentioning this over and over and over again ad nauseum, but it's important for Native literature as well. One of my old buddies is Sherman Alexie. He is a Spokane Coeur d'Alene Indian. I told you before we went to school together, or actually opposing schools. I did Eastern Washington University. Down the road from him, he went to Gonzaga, which is a more famous college. But never mind. We want to talk about his writing. As I mentioned before, back in the 80s and 90s, playing more Indian than thou was more of a thing than it is today. What do I mean by that? Well, it's this idea that you're challenging other Indians, Indianness. Oh, that guy's not a real Indian because he drives a Harley or whatever. I don't know. He rides a Harley. He's got too much money. He's not a real Indian. Or I'm more of an Indian than you because I live in an old beat up trailer and you've got an old beat up house made out of slab and whatever brick. But anyway, that's the way the comparative misfortune, like I mentioned before. Anyway, Sherman Alexie, in his story Class, which is in the book The Toughest Indian in the World. It's too bad we don't have it in Read, Listen, Tell. He chose the other one about the Indian boxer or wrestler or something, and it was homoerotic, and I don't want to get into that, but I want to read this one because it's more about Sherman Alexie himself. He was always struggling with this concept of more Indian than thou. I might have mentioned it before because I went to Eastern Washington University. We had an elder named Pauline Flett, and she used to teach Spokane, the Spokane language. And I used to take her classes, and I took all of them, and I was learning Spokane language, and I was like, eat and you know, stem spoos and all that. You know, they have a cool glottalized language. And then I see Sherman on the weekends, and I say, hey, stem spoos, dude, and he looked at me like, what? So how would I get off on this tangent? Well, the thing is, this is something that we used to struggle with as natives. Here I am with his old beat up. He didn't have a car, or if he did, he shared it with his sister. He lived in downtown Spokane in a shared apartment with his sister, and I think they drove an old beat up Datsun 210 or something. And I had, because I saved my pennies and I got a loan from my credit union, a 1985 Chrysler Laser. That was an awesome car. They don't make them anymore, too bad. But never mind. But he would sometimes look at me like, dude, look at your fancy car. Again, it's kind of this whole more Indian than thou comparative misfortune thing. And it's dramatized really well in the story Class, where I'm not going to read the whole thing, but let's spend some time looking at it together. So our protagonist is Edgar Joseph Eagle Runner. He's a Seattle lawyer. He went to college and he's achieving success. You know, he's a native. He's a Spokane Indian, and he moved to the city and he became a lawyer and he's getting success. And we have this question though, is his success becoming alienating and isolating, separating from his traditional culture? Does it? Does the fact that when you become successful necessarily separate you from your culture? All right, let me read. She wanted to know if I was Catholic. I was completely unprepared to respond with any degree of clarity to such a dangerous question. After all, we had been talking about the shrimp appetizers, which were covered with an ambitious pesto sauce, and where they fit in terms of quality in our very separate histories of shrimp appetizers in particular, and seafood appetizers in general. I'd just been describing to her how cayenne and lobster seem to be mortal enemies, one of the more secular and inane culinary observations I'd made. When she'd focused her blue eyes on me, really looked at me for the first time in the 1 minute and 35 seconds we'd known each other, and asked me if I was Catholic. How do you answer a question like that, especially when you've just met a woman at one of those house parties where you're expected to know everybody in attendance, but had gradually come to realize that you only knew the host couple, and then only well enough to ask about the welfare of the two kids, a boy and a girl, or two boys. You thought they parented. As far as I could tell, there were no priests, ministers, or pastors milling about, so I had no easy visual aids in guessing at the dominant denomination in the room. If there'd been a white woman at any gathering, I didn't have enough looks, charm, intelligence, or money to approach anybody more attractive than that, and I hadn't had enough character to approach the less attractive. Crassly speaking, I'd always made sure to play ball only with my equals. You're Indian, she said, stretching the word into 3 syllables and nearly a fourth. Do you like that? I like your hair, she said, touching the black braids that hung down past my chest. I'd been growing the braids since I'd graduated from law school. My hair impressed the jurors but irritated judges. Perfect. I like your hair too, I said, and brushed a pale strand away from her forehead. I counted 3 blemishes and 1 mole on her face. I wanted to kiss the tips of her fingers. Women expected kisses on the parts of their body hidden by clothes, by private places, but were often surprised when I paid more attention to their public features. Hands, hairline, the soft skin around their eyes. You're beautiful, I said. No, I'm not, she said. I'm just pretty. But pretty is good enough. I still didn't know her name, but I could have guessed at it. Her generation of white women usually carried 2-syllable names like Becky, Erin, and Wendy, or monosyllabic nicknames that lacked any adornment, Peg, Deb, or Sam, efficient names, quick in the shower names, just brush it and go names. Her mother and her mother's friends would be known by more ornate monikers. If she had been daughters, they would have been named after their grandmothers. The country was filling up with little white girls named Rebecca, Elizabeth, and Wilhelmina. Sarah, I guessed. Your name is Sarah. With or without an H? She asked. Without, I said, pleased with my psychic ability. Actually, it's neither. My name is Susan. Susan McDermott, without the H. I'm Edgar Eagle Runner, I said, though my driver's license still read Edgar Joseph. Eagle Runner, she repeated, feeling the shape of my name fill her mouth and roll past her tongue, teeth, and lips. Susan, I said. Eagle Runner, she whispered. What kind of Indian are you? Spokane. Never heard of it. We're a small tribe, a salmon people. The salmon are disappearing, she said. Yes, I said. Yes, they are. Susan McDermott and I were married in a small ceremony 7 months later in St. Therese Catholic Church in Madrona, a gentrified neighborhood 10 minutes from downtown Seattle. She'd been baptized at St. Therese as a toddler by a Jesuit who many years later went hiking on Mount Rainier and vanished. Father David or Joseph or Father something biblical. She didn't remember anything about him, neither the color of his hair nor the exact shape of his theology. But she thought that his disappearance was a metaphor for her love life. I'm going to skip over now. This is a really cool book, though, that is dramatizing what I'm talking about more Indian than thou, and haven't gotten there yet. We're looking at the protagonist, Edgar Joseph, who changed his name back to Eagle Runner to honor his family. He's a successful lawyer in Seattle, and he's at a house party, a family party, and he meets a white girl named Susan McDermott, and they get married. So as they go along, and I'm going to skip over the pages, I like the interaction between them, but as they go along, page 42 of this book, during the first 2 years of our marriage, we attended 37 cocktail parties, 18 weddings, 1 divorce, 7 Christmas parties, 2 New Year's Eve parties, and 3 New Year's Day parties, 9 birthday parties, only one of them for a child under the age of 18, 6 opera performances, 9 literary readings, 12 museum openings, 1 museum closing, 3 ballets, including a revival of Swan Lake in New York City, 1 spouse swapping party we left before we took off our coats, and 32 films, including most of those nominated for Oscars, and 2 or 3 that had screened at the Sundance Film Festival. So they're nice and comfortably married. And as you can probably already guess, their marriage is hitting the doldrums. So I'm going to jump over to where they get kind of in the doldrums. This is page 43 of this book, Toughest Indian in the World. And he starts to think, I need a little spice in my marriage. So he starts thinking of how he can cheat on her. I think that she cheated on him too. Yep, says here that Susan kept her Friday lunches free so she could carry on an affair with an architect named Harry. And now he wants to get his own in. So he's in a San Francisco hotel and he looks at the yellow pages. He gets on the phone and the woman answers A1 Escorts. The husky voice, somehow menacing. I'm sure her children hated the sound of it, even as I found myself aroused by its timbre. A1 Escorts, she said again when I did not speak. Oh, I said. Hi, hello, I'm looking for some company this evening. Where you at? The Prescott. Nice place. Yeah, they have whirlpool bathtubs. Water sports will cost you extra. Oh, no, no, no. I'm rather traditional. Okay, Mr. Traditional, what are you looking for? I'd slept with 17 prostitutes, all of them blonde and blue eyed. 12 of them had been busty, while the other 5 had been small breasted. 8 of them had claimed to be college students. One of them had a chemistry textbook in her backpack. Do you employ any Indian women? I asked. Indian? Like with a dot in the forehead? No, no, that's East Indian. From India. I'm looking for American Indian. You know, like Tonto. We don't have any boys. Oh, no, I mean, I want an Indian woman. There was a long silence on the other end. Was she looking through some kind of catalog? Searching her inventory for the perfect woman for me? Was she calling other escort companies looking for a referral? I wanted to hang up the phone. I'd never had intercourse with an Indian woman. Yeah, we got somebody. She's a pro. What do you mean by pro? She used to work pornos. Pornos? Dirty movies? X rated? You got them right there on the pay per view in your room, buddy. What's her name? She calls herself Tawny Feather. You're kidding. I never kid. So we're going on, and the guy is in the hotel. Again, he's a successful lawyer. He's in San Francisco, and he's lonely. He knows his wife's been cheating on him, and he wants to kind of get it on himself. So he calls an escort service. Ah, remember, what we're looking at is a Native American Spokane Indian man who is living the good life, kind of sort of upper middle class, as a lawyer. And what can we say? Well, let's just keep rolling. He fools around with Tawny Feather, and he's still feeling terrible. It says here on page 46, uh, Susan gave birth to their first child, a boy, big baby, black hair, but the child died. After our child died, Susan and I quit having sex, or rather, she stopped wanting to have sex. I just want to tell the whole story. For months, I pressured, coerced, seduced, and emotionally blackmailed her into sleeping with me. At first, I assumed she'd engaged in another affair with another architect named Harry, but my private detective found only evidence of her grief, crying jags in public restrooms, aimless wandering in the children's departments at Nordstrom's and on the Bon Marche, and visits to a therapist I'd never heard about. She wasn't touching anybody else but me. Our lives moved on. So one day, the little boy, Mr. Edgar, no, I keep calling him Holding Eagle. No, Eagle Runner. Holding Eagle is a guy up on NPR. He works for NPR in Minnesota. No, Edgar Joseph Eagle Runner. He goes to a bar, and now he meets some real Indians, because it's a bar where lots of Indians hang out. Where are we going to find it? It's on page 49, I think. Where is it? I'm trying to drive to. Is it Chuck's? I chose Chuck's. A dive near the corner of Virginia and East. I'd driven by the place a number of times and seen the Indians who loitered outside. I assumed it was an Indian bar, one of those establishments where the clientele, through chance and design, is mostly indigenous. I heard about these kinds of places. They are supposed to exist in every city. What can I get you? Asked the bartender when I sat on the stool closest to the door. She was an Indian woman with scars on her face and knuckles, a fighter. She was a woman who had once been pretty, but had grown up in a place where pretty was punished. Now, 20 pounds overweight, on her way to 40 pounds more, she was most likely saving money for a complete move to a city yet to be determined. Hey, handsome, she asked again as I stared blankly at her oft-broken nose. I decided that her face resembled most of the furniture in the bar, dark, stained by unknown insults, and in a continual state of repair. What the F would you like to drink? Water, I said, surprised that the word Fuck could sound so friendly. Water? Yeah, water. She filled a glass of tap from behind her and plunked it down in front of me. $1. For tap water? For space rental. I handed her a $5 bill. Keep the change, I said, and took a big drink. Cool. Next time you get a clean glass, she said, and waited for my reaction. I swallowed hard, kept my dinner down, and smiled. I don't need to know what's coming next, I said. I like mysteries. What kind of mysteries? Hard boiled. The kind where the dog never gets run over, the hero gets punched in the head, and the bad guy gets eaten by sharks. Not me, she said. I got too much blood in my life already. I like romances. I wondered if she wanted to sleep with me. So we're going to keep rolling. Um, Two obese Indian women shared a table in the back. Let's see. An Indian couple danced in front of a broken jukebox, and one large and muscular Indian guy played pool by himself in his white t-shirt, blue jean jacket, tight jeans, and cowboy boots. He looked like Chief Broom from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I decided he could have killed me with a flick of one finger. He looked up from his pool cue when he felt my eyes on him. "What the F are you looking at?" he asked. His eyes were darker than the 8 ball. I had no idea that Fuck could be such a dangerous word. "Nothing," I said. Still holding his cue stick, he walked a few paces closer to me. I was afraid, very afraid. "Nothing?" he asked. "Do I look like nothing to you?" "No, no, no, that's not what I meant. I mean, I was just watching you play pool, that's all." He stared at me, studied me like an owl might study a field mouse. "You just keep your eyes to yourself," he said, and he turned back to his game. I thought I was safe. I looked down to the bartender who was shaking her head at me. "Because I just want to know," sputtered the big Indian. "Just want to know who the hell you think you are." Now, I'm going too far. I already almost went 30 minutes with this. He's mad at him. He says, "Go back to your mansion and read some effing Teletubbies to your effing white kids." This is where we get into playing more Indian than thou. Eventually, something happens, and I'm not going to tell you what happens because I want you to pick up the story called Class in The Toughest Indian in the World. Look it up. You might be able to find it online. I might be able to find a copy for you, a link somewheres. And you'll see, here are some questions I want to challenge you with. Edgar's success clearly appears to alienate him and isolate him from his fellow natives, as we often see in this whole more Indian thou-ism. Question raises, well, colonialism, does it distort our identity? The fact that we are no longer wearing beads and buckskin and doing all the old stuff, but we're now living in dominant society or dominating society, as my old buddy Lee Francis used to say. Does it distort our identity? Or, as my other buddy Tiffany Midge would say, no, we're adapting. So does it distort us externally and internally, make us question who we are? Or, as the more positive Tiffany Midge would say, no, we grow and we adapt and we make it Indian, whatever it is that we're facing. If we're becoming successful, we just work around the colonialism and we do stuff. By the way, Tiffany Midge is a big fan of Alien versus Predator. Does that make her any less Indian? Yearning for acceptance, natives versus non-natives. Authenticity measured by suffering. Can we measure our authenticity by suffering? That is a question. I want you to look at Why Indigenous Literatures Matter, page 161, a story or a mention of Richard Wagamis, where, what's the fellow's name? I'm starting to draw a blank and I'm spinning my wheels big time. I'm not going to stand up here and read all of it to you, but I want you to read it on your own, page 161, where this is from the book A Quality of Light, where we have two boys. One is named Joshua Kane. He's Ojibwe. He was adopted at birth by a white Protestant couple in southwestern Ontario and raised as their own, and his best friend, Johnny Gebhardt, a white boy seeking certainty in the world. And this idea of native versus non-native The native boy, he becomes a preacher, doesn't make him any less native. Whereas the white boy is starting to fight for Indian rights. So what do we do with that? They take different routes, and I believe Daniel Heath Justice comments on this extensively. Next, at the end of Why Indigenous Lives Literatures Matter, this self-critique. Let's read a little bit of it. This is page 181. I've already gone 31 minutes. This is pretty much the longest video I've ever made. I got to hurry up. Page 181, 181. There it is right there. Boom. Nope, page 182. I'm wrong. Reading the Ruptures, chapter 5. This is a book about stories and how and why they matter. It's about the stories we tell and the stories others tell about us. It's about how stories can either strengthen, wound, or seemingly erase our humanity and shared connections, and how our stories are expressed or repressed, shared or hidden, recognized or dismissed. Stories are bigger than the texts and the bodies that carry them. When absent, they leave gaps that communicate as surely as presences. Now, we can go on and on and on. He says he grew up nerdy, light-skinned, mixed, queer Cherokee kid in the town of Victoria, Colorado, deep in the traditional homeland of the Ute people. His dad quit drinking when he was 6 and resolved to be a better father. Mom had vivid memories of her abuse at her own mother's hands and refused to inflict that scarring legacy on me, her only child, is what he's saying. And although I wasn't particularly popular among my peers, at times experienced a fair bit of homophobic taunting, with Tinkerbell and Fairy being the epithets of choice for quite a few years. So the fact that he is away from home, his traditional homeland, does that challenge it? We've got here successful, witty, educated, guilt-ridden. Does all that really matter? So I could go on and on and on talking about this, but I'm starting to spin my wheels and mess up. So I'm going to knock it off, and thank you again for being so patient with me, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.